Good morning. I'm Mike, and today I'm going to review Chapter 7 of the book Crucial Influence by Grenny, Patterson, Maxfield, McMillan, and Switzler. Leadership Skills to Create Lasting Behavior Change. Chapter 7 is entitled Reward with Care, and it goes over the fifth source of influence for behavior change in an organization, and that is structural motivation. The authors note that a lot of leaders risk using extrinsic incentives too much in order to affect behavior change, whether it's giving rewards for the wrong things or in the wrong way, or even giving too much punishment to try to change behavior. These can have a negative effect, and in enacting a real behavior change for the long term, they mention that it's more effective to address personal motivation and social motivation first. When we're thinking about the types of incentives, how does it tie in with personal motivation and social motivation? The authors say to use extrinsic rewards third. That first, in a strategy for implementing change, that vital behaviors need to be given the proper frame morally, and that the reason that people adopt different new behaviors is because they feel that it's right to do so. I'll let you read this chapter on your own, but they go through examples, including one where people enjoyed doing a certain behavior, and now they were given incentives to continue that behavior. But then after those incentives were taken away after a time, thinking that, oh, this behavior is now embedded in their, in their way of doing things, they took away the extrinsic incentive, and people found that behavior that they were doing before, which was enjoyable, now to be less enjoyable because now they weren't getting an incentive. Now they become more habituated to doing it to receive the incentive instead of just taking enjoyment in doing it itself. We need to frame how the behavior makes us feel. Put it in a frame where it's socially desirable and it has a moral or a social impact. Knowing that this behavior is meaningful, not just a way to receive an incentive. A key point is that using incentives last will serve better in the long term, and that sustaining change will happen more if it's framed morally and socially. This new behavior needs to have clear moral and social messaging. The authors then go into a few points of how to implement incentives. Again, keeping in mind that we don't want to jump to just giving it extrinsic incentives, but put it in that frame socially and morally. Why is this good to do it? Maybe what feels good about doing it? Some guidelines for implementing these incentives are to think small, reward behavior and not just the results, and also punish less. Thinking small. Even the tiniest rewards, thinking about what seems tiny, what seems small, can actually have big change in the long term. For example, we might acknowledge and appreciate those small senses of appreciation. For example, giving a certificate of appreciation for helping out. Now you've recognized this person has given a contribution and they'll be more willing to keep doing that same behavior in the long term. So we can give some incentives, but keep them small, because largely we want those intrinsic motivation to come from social motivation and a sense of doing the right thing. The next point in developing motivators, or a sense of extrinsic motivation, is that we don't want to just reward an appearance of a result. We want to reward the behavior and an effort to enact that change. One point that the authors mention is that if we reward the actual steps which people go through, that eventually the result takes care of itself. The behavior that we reward is going to drive the behavior that we actually see as a result. If things seem like they're a little bit off with the system of incentives, for example, you're getting results, but not in the same frame, not in the same mindset that you would if people are thinking that they're doing it for a right reason, a purpose, something that's meaningful, then the incentives might be off. You might want to look at the incentives and say, let's reevaluate what exactly is it that we're rewarding. Are we encouraging that mindset of doing the right thing, feeling good about what we're doing? Or are we just incentivizing the appearance of a certain result? And the final point in implementing incentives are to discipline sparingly. In fact, the authors mention that we should provide a warning first instead of just going straight to the punishment. And this might be enough to deter any kind of unwanted behavior. In summary, the authors note that we use extrinsic rewards last and look to social motivators first. We also want to use incentives wisely. And don't forget the small ways of showing appreciation. We want to look at the process of moving towards a certain result and reward that process, not only the resulting behavior. And finally, disciplining sparingly will encourage people to look at ways of changing behavior that is in sync with their own values in a way that they feel what they're doing is meaningful and not just acting out of compliance.